Good evening, Houdat Nation. Brendan Boylan here with Bob Rose. We thank you so much for tuning in to the Saints News Network pregame show and what seemed like a really long week. No Saints football last week, and then the Saints get the very last game of Week 7. I know a ton of you diehards in the Houdat Nation are just excited to see the black and gold get back out on the field. And Bob, it's not just the fans that are excited to get back and see this team on the field. There's a lot of players that are excited to get back on the field. The Saints bring a lot back from IR. There's a ton of moves that happened today, along with an injury report that just dropped. So let's have you fill in everybody what's going on. Before we get to that, how are you doing? It's been longer than usual without us being on screen together.
Yeah, it has, Brendan, and it's good to see you. I hope you and your family are doing well. Houdat Nation, welcome back, and thank you for tuning in on after what feels like a mini off season. And folks have followed me or know me for a while realize how superstitious I am. So I've been straying away from our gold uniforms for the Saints News Network. I broke it out tonight, so fingers crossed. If the Saints drop one that they are favored to win and should win easily on paper, you're not going to see a shirt anymore, guys. Not on game day anyway. But yeah, folks, like Brendan said, we've been talking for the last couple weeks now about reinforcements being on the way for the New Orleans Saints, and they are. The bad news is Will Lutz, and we figured it would be a couple more weeks for him. Will Lutz will not be kicking tonight. Those honors will go to Brian Johnson. So again, fingers crossed. Michael Thomas has continued to be out of action, and David Onyemata has one more game to serve of his 6-game, not 6-week NFL suspension. But coming back for the Saints offensively, they're going to get Traquan Smith, which is at least a warm body for a receiving core that will be without Deontay Harris and the previously aforementioned Michael Thomas. And the offensive line should be, at least on paper, back to full strength with the return of Teron Armstead and Eric McCoy. Marcus Davenport will be back in the lineup tonight after a monstrous start to the season and a terrific preseason. And Quan Alexander will be back at linebacker. Those guys, Malcolm Roach is on the inactive list, something that just dropped a few minutes ago. And Peyton Turner popped up on the injury list. So folks, we have yet another week of, we get either Davenport or Turner, but we have not seen both in the same room together. So beginning to think that one is Bruce Wayne and one is Batman. Hopefully we get the Batman version tonight.
And they do look similar in size and stature. That was one of the biggest comparisons on draft night when the Saints selected Turner in the first round. So you might be on to something. Have you seen them both in the same room at the same time? We certainly haven't, but Bob, that's a lot of guys coming back. I think one more note for fans that might have missed the news earlier this week with the wide receiving corps. Chris Hogan has elected to retire. A little unexpected, but based off of what I was able to gather information-wise and what I'd seen on social media, it was a decision with his wife being pregnant to stay home and take the responsibilities of being a dad, which I totally understand why some people would elect to not travel across the world playing a sport. And listen, he had a great long career, undrafted guy, 8 years in the league, 2 Super Bowls, and was a pro lacrosse player. So did a lot in his football career. But Traquan Smith, a big guy coming back. They've also elevated Kevin White. What are your thoughts on that, Bob? That was a guy that a lot of people were surprised to get yet another shot in the NFL. Obviously, a big draft bust at this point in his career, being a top 10 pick back in the day. But a lot of Saints fans were saying, you know what, if this guy's finally healthy, this might be something that the Saints could maybe find a diamond in the rough here. What are your thoughts on him coming into this game and being active for the first time for the Saints?
Yeah, well, first of all, I see the move. Again, with Deontay Harris being out, you don't know what you're going to get out of Traquan Smith, whether he is a truly 100% healthy. Deontay out, Thomas out, Hogan retiring. So I say give Kevin White a shot. Listen, as far as physical ability, when he's healthy, he is a matchup nightmare for defenses. He coming out of college, out of West Virginia, I think it was 7 years ago. He had good hands, terrific speed, and a physically imposing athlete. And what I saw from him in preseason, he was making some plays in training camp. And that one preseason game, he dropped 2 easy passes back to back. That kind of had Who Dat Nation down on him a little bit. But the thing that I watched was the routes that he ran to get open on those 2 drop passes. He looks to be an extremely sharp route runner. He's the prototypical size that Sean Payton likes in his receivers. So I kind of agree with what you said. Why not give the guy a shot? At this point, with the underwhelming performance of the receiving corps up to this point in the year, although Marquez Callaway has been coming along pretty nicely over the last couple of games, what do you have to lose, by giving Kevin White a shot? It doesn't look like the Saints are going to heavily explore the trade market, for at least a top-notch wideout. So you're just trying to keep your head above water until old 13 gets back, and you see what he could do. So I'm interested to see what kind of looks Kevin White is going to get tonight.
Well, here's another point with the passing game tonight, Bob. Wind and rain expected in the forecast. From what I'm seeing, wind gusts up to 35 miles per hour. So the passing game and the kicking game obviously affected. The Saints are also down a few running backs, right? After Alvin Kamara, it's a lot of let's throw something at the wall and see what sticks. What do you expect out of Kamara tonight?
I expect Kamara to carry the Saints offense. First of all, for anybody who watched that San Francisco versus Indianapolis Colts game last night, that was played in San Francisco, in much of the same weather that what New Orleans and Seattle are going to be dealing with tonight. And the passing game was affected. Don't think that the teams aren't going to take deep shots, but they're going to be more measured in doing so. You're talking about a Seattle defense that is dead last in the league in total yardage. 20th in points allowed. I think 28th against the pass and 30th against the run, or vice versa. Either way, they've been abysmal on pretty much every defensive category. So you got to believe that Alvin Kamara, who had 162 yards of all-purpose against Seattle when these teams met in 2019, including 92 yards receiving, he's going to go up against a couple of very good linebackers in Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks. Wagner is as good as they come. He's Seattle's version of Demario Davis. But Jordan Brooks is an old-school lunch pail kind of guy. He's a heck of a run stopper, a straightforward downhill guy, but he's very vulnerable in space. Well, that's Kamara's strength. And we finally saw the Saints kind of utilize that a little bit against Washington a couple of weeks ago, using him more as a receiver than we had seen up to this point in the year. We know Kamara can take the load between the tackles. So that New Orleans is going to prod and poke and moves that Seattle defense around with 41 to see what he could do. It's especially if the field is slick and kind of mucky. We're going to miss Taysom Hill because he's the best power runner this team has right now. Devine Ozigbo might see some snaps, but I expect Ty Montgomery more often than not to give Kamara a spell and a rest from the running back position. Ty, as you, of course, remember, Brendan, had a 100-yard performance as a running back last year against Carolina. He started his NFL career as a running back. He's no Alvin Kamara. He's not even Latavius Murray, but he can get the job done if asked.
Well, for New Orleans, they're, like you said, Bob, going up against a team that has been nowhere near the Legion of Boom, which now seems like a lifetime ago up in Seattle. But they're also a Seattle Seahawks team that's depleted on the offensive side. Question marks regarding a starting guard this evening. Already without Chris Carson, maybe without Alex Collins. He was questionable coming into the game as well. And, of course, Russell Wilson having an injury very similar to Drew Brees. Very eerie and odd how close and similar those injuries were by the same player in Aaron Donald. So when you're looking at this team with Geno Smith at the helm, a guy that had an interesting roller coaster of an NFL career himself, Kyle Mosley wrote an article earlier today saying that the Saints can't let him rebirth in Seattle. And I've seen him do magnificent things on Monday Night Football, leading a comeback over the Atlanta Falcons with the Jets way back when inside of the Georgia Dome. What do the Saints have to do to make sure Geno Smith is uncomfortable in a game that he's really trying to prove he still belongs in the NFL, and at least for this time without Russell Wilson, that the Seahawks can rely on him to at least put them in position where when Wilson comes back, they can make a playoff push?
Well, first of all, the Seahawks are a desperate team, and I think the Saints need this win too, with the gauntlet of teams that they have coming up. But the Seahawks absolutely need this win to even have a shot at staying in the NFC West race. I saw a very physical, very intense team effort from Seattle in the second half against Pittsburgh last year. So the Saints are going to have to match that. As far as Geno Smith is concerned, you need to prevent him from getting into a rhythm. And to do that, you actually need to finish your pressures. Seattle has given up a bunch of sacks and even more quarterback hurries this year. Their pass protection continues to be a big, big problem. And like you said, they have a couple offensive linemen banged up. Geno Smith is nowhere near as mobile as Russell Wilson, but he can move around and buy some time if necessary. Cam Jordan has not had nearly as bad a year as what a lot of people are making out, but Cam has yet to record a sack. He leads the team in quarterback pressures and quarterback hits, but he has to finish plays. Having Davenport back and hopefully 100% healthy is huge, because you need Seattle's biggest weakness out of a very leaky offensive line is along the edge. I think they've given up 13.5 sacks either from defensive ends or edge rushers this year. So, Carl Granderson, Tano Passanio, Cam, Marcus Davenport, they need to actually finish plays, move Smith around, prevent him from getting into a rhythm. I've called Geno Smith a mediocre quarterback. I've called him a journeyman quarterback. Well, this is the same Saints defense that has gotten torn apart in recent years by Case Keenum. This year, Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, mediocre quarterbacks. Geno Smith has a couple of outstanding weapons to target, and we'll get into them in a minute. But you need to, shut down the Seattle running game, because that's where they had success against Pittsburgh in the second half last week. They'll be without Chris Carson, and Alex Collins is banged up, like you alluded to. But if Collins can go, or they can get Travis Homer or DJ Dallas, their third down backs going. Those guys are real quick twitch backs in open space. If the Seahawks can establish balance with their running game, that's going to allow Smith to kind of pick the Saints defense apart at leisure without feeling like the game's pressure is completely on his shoulders. If the Saints can shut down the run, and if they're able to pressure Geno Smith, then that's an extra advantage for the New Orleans defensive backs, who have a pay-per-view worthy matchup against the Seattle receivers. But you can't let Geno get into a rhythm and get comfortable. You can't.
Well, this is a New Orleans Saints defense that's maybe as healthy as they've been all year. You talked very early on here in the broadcast that Quan Alexander's back, which I think a big question is, well, how much are we going to see Pete Warner, who really shined in the absence of Quan Alexander? How do you make sure both those guys get their reps, because they can both be game changers at that linebacking position and certainly helping shut down that running game of the Seahawks? Back to your point, New Orleans themselves, though you're facing a team that you said is a leaky offensive line. Seattle gave up, I believe, 5 sacks against Pittsburgh last week. Well, the Saints are the bottom of the league themselves in those sack numbers, and they definitely need someone to step up. We mentioned the conditions. That's going to hurt a lot of phases of the offense, but it's also going to hurt the defense and trying to get sideline to sideline, depending on how muddy that field is. So let's go to the one spot of the field where slipping and sliding could take a big part, and that's in the secondary. The Saints have had one of the best secondaries in football this season. Marshawn Lattimore, I think, not getting as much national media attention as maybe he deserves, because you have Diggs down in Dallas, who seems to get an interception every week, and he's just becoming that ball-hawking type of cornerback. But Marshawn Lattimore, one of the highest-graded guys in football, going into the bye week, led the league in pass breakups. And you've gotten some great production out of Paulson Adebo and haven't had to see a whole lot of Bradley Roby so far this season, a guy that a lot of people, analysts and fans alike, thought was going to step in and be cornerback 2 for the New Orleans Saints. Now you're facing a receiving corps that's got DK Metcalf, who I said on a podcast is just the definition of a NFL combine beast. They just don't make people like that. And Metcalf has showed it all year long. But he's not the only receiving threat. You go opposite of him in Tyler Lockett, who is big play guy week in and week out. How do you stop those two? With a Geno Smith quarterback, like I said, you said that Seattle's desperate for a win. I said Geno's desperate to show that he still belongs in this league and can be trusted to put the Seahawks in a position, healthy position, to make a playoff push when Russell Wilson comes back. How do you prevent those guys from tearing you apart? And what concerns do you have with the Saints matching up against a guy like Metcalf, who I think is a Pro Bowler year in and year out for years to come?
Yeah, he really is. I mean, if there's a true beast at wide receiver, and we like to call Michael Thomas a beast, DK Metcalf has every bit the physicality that Michael Thomas does. Thomas is probably the better route runner, but DK can beat you deep too. I mean, he's a 4.3, 4.4, 40 guy. Was at the combine anyway. To beat these guys, and remember, Seattle also has Freddie Swain, who is a very capable number 3 wide receiver, and a very athletic tight end in Gerald Everett, along with a solid intermediate target at tight end in Will Dissly. So those guys are going to have to be accounted for. But Seattle's going to win or lose by how well DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett perform. And I expect Lattimore to be on Metcalf more often than not. With Adebo taking on the very tall task of trying to contain Lockett. But to be able to do well against these guys, especially in poor field conditions, you have to get up physical, man-to-man, and press them at the line of scrimmage. Don't let them get a free release, especially if the footing is a little bit so-so, because in sloppy field conditions, the receiver is always going to have the advantage because they know where you're going. The defensive back does not. They have to react. So if you can get that wide receiver off of their route by being physical with them at the line of scrimmage, Adebo and Marshawn are going to be able to match up athletically with Lockett and Metcalf. And Metcalf has a bit of a mercurial personality, a little like Odell Beckham, as far as an emotional style of play. So if things aren't going his way, and Marshawn Lattimore or a guy like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson can get inside of his head, he does go a little bit haywire. I'm not saying you're going to earn yourself penalties, but he maybe could take himself emotionally out of the game. But again, you got to be physical. You got to frustrate these guys early on. Let them know that every single yard, every single catch, every single target is going to be contested.
With Metcalf and Lockett, is there a third guy that could really make a difference for the Seattle offense? We said they're depleted at running back. We mentioned their 2 best players, obviously depleted at quarterback as well. Is there an X factor on this team that we haven't addressed so far?
We just mentioned Freddie Swain. I think Freddie Swain is an extremely underrated number 3 wide receiver. He's not nearly on the skill level of Lockett or Metcalf, but I think a guy like Freddie Swain, or we've seen Gerald Everett have success against New Orleans when he was with the LA Rams and their tight end. Geno Smith was extremely conservative in his throws last week against Pittsburgh. He really didn't take any unnecessary chances, much the way that New Orleans was using Jameis Winston early in the year. So a guy like Swain or a guy like Everett, or even Alex Collins, who I love as a running back if he's healthy and can be a full go today. All 3 of those guys are going to have to be accounted for. Collins, of course, more of a rusher, but Travis Homer, DJ Dallas are fine receivers out of the backfield. Seattle doesn't use their running backs a whole lot. At least they didn't with Russell Wilson. They preferred a downfield approach a little bit. But I saw them. Weather alert.
Yep.
I saw Seattle use DJ Dallas and Travis Homer a lot more as receivers last week against Pittsburgh than I'm used to seeing with Russell Wilson under the helm. So that's going to put. I'm glad Quan Alexander is back, and Pete Werner's still going to get his snaps, and Demario Davis. All 3 of those linebackers are going to be tested and covered by the Seattle tight ends and backs coming out of the backfield because Dennis Allen is going to want to man up on Metcalf and Lockett with his top cornerbacks as much as possible.
Do you expect Marshawn Lattimore to shadow Metcalf, or do you expect the Saints to move him around, considering you have 2 high-caliber wide receivers in Seattle?
The last time these guys played, and Metcalf was only a rookie, we saw Marshawn on Metcalf almost exclusively then, and I actually went back and watched that game because I was curious, because Tyler Lockett had a really big day against the Saints, mostly against Eli Apple, though. Adebo is a little bit different creature than what Eli Apple is. I'm a bigger fan of Eli than what many are, but I think Adebo has better coverage skills and is certainly a more physical guy. But I think they're going to use Lattimore to shadow Metcalf as often as possible. Now, when DK, moves into the slot, you might see Marshawn move outside onto Lockett at that point. And then they might lock up Chauncey Gardner-Johnson or Adebo. We've seen CGJ and Adebo out of the slot more often this year than we've seen Lattimore. Lattimore seems to be more comfortable on the outside.
For the New Orleans Saints, we've talked about their defense. We talked about the offense, the wide receivers, the running back, and the offensive line certainly getting healthy. But I do want to key in on those trenches with McCoy and Armstead, both not carrying injury designations. So from what we understand is they're going to be a full go. How much is that going to help this team, and how much is it going to help evaluate Jameis Winston at this point? Because I think through the first 5 weeks of the season, certainly not impressive in terms of the yards, not even 900 passing yards for Winston, but 12 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, a little bit more of a game manager. Are we going to be able to evaluate Jameis Winston as the potential future of this team moving forward now that the offensive line's healthy, and certainly as the receiving corps gets back to full strength?
Brandon, I think the evaluation of Jameis Winston starts now because the offensive line is back at full strength. And don't get me wrong, I thought Calvin Throckmorton played outstanding at right guard, and I thought, we know James Hurst is a more than capable offensive lineman when he has to step in for Armstead. But, Armstead and McCoy are 2 Pro Bowl caliber players. That allows Ruiz to move back to right guard, where he was coming along nicely. He did not play well at center, but Ruiz had a strong camp and strong start to the season at right guard. So I think pass protection is really going to start to take form and play better than what it has. So at this point, that's why I said the evaluation of Jameis Winston starts now. It doesn't start and finish now. You could start to really put a full evaluation on him once he gets a healthy Michael Thomas back. But no quarterback, it's an unfair evaluation on any quarterback when they're under constant pressure all the time. And I think Jameis has actually handled it pretty well. We saw his last 2 games against the Giants and the Redskins. I said it, were the 2 most productive games he's had this year. And I've written and said that I really started to see a rhythm starting to take form with the Saints passing attack against New York and against Washington. So I think that we'll start to see that kind of rhythm tonight. Seattle on paper, they don't provide much of a pass rush, but Pete Carroll's a defensive guy. Kenny Norton Jr., their defensive coordinator. He's put together some nice game plans in the past. And the book on Winston has been throughout his career is you rattle him and he's going to make mistakes. So Seattle is probably going to blitz Winston if they can't get to him, with their front 4 or 5 people. They'll blitz Winston, and it's on Jameis at that point. The offensive line, when your offensive blockers are just outnumbered by pass rushers, it falls on the quarterback to make a quick and decisive decision. So that's when it's going to fall on Jameis. But the issue that I had over the first few weeks was the fact that so many defenses were sacking Winston or moving him off his spot by rushing just 3 or 4 guys. I don't think we're going to see that from here on out.
I also think with the receivers getting healthy, you're going to see a little bit more of Alvin Kamara in the passing game, not having defenses so honed in on him, little pressure taken off of Kamara. And I know certainly from a fantasy football standpoint, myself and plenty of Alvin Kamara owners in PPR leagues would love to see those receiving numbers go up. Sticking with Jameis Winston, you said the evaluation starts now, but a lot of mixed reviews on Winston through the first 5 weeks. Is there anything he can do this week against Seattle on the road, Monday Night Football, maybe the biggest game of his Saints career to this point? Is there anything he can do tonight that would certainly win the fans over?
Like we just said a minute ago, Jameis's production has been starting to climb very significantly over the last couple of weeks. If he continues that climb, especially in adverse weather conditions and in a hostile environment on national TV where he has struggled throughout his career, I think if he has another solid game like he did against the Giants or like he did against Washington, or even an efficient game like he did in the season opener against the Packers, that should show everybody that he is capable of consistently above average play. And obviously the Saints are going to need more than that when they face the true contenders. But again, in adverse weather conditions and in a hostile environment against a rival that you have struggled with on the road, If he can continue that trend upward, I think we're going to really start to see Who Dat Nation put their full support behind it. I'm disappointed that he hasn't gotten more consistent support from our fan base, but I understand. Yeah, he's filling some absolutely gargantuan shoes, and he's had to do so, without even half a playing deck, with so many injuries and changes on the offensive front. But I see Jameis playing well tonight. Seattle's a defense. They're giving up almost 69% completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks. It's going to be difficult to beat the Seahawks deep. But if they give him the time, the offensive line gives him the time, he's still going to take his shots. Jameis has to show the world now that he can be patient and take what a defense gives him without throwing the ball away or taking a sack. In other words, stay ahead of the markers. Don't take any negative plays.
This is one of the first times that I would have told people this season that I felt that Jameis Winston was not just a good or a safe, but a great fantasy play this week, just because of how poor Seattle's defense has been. Obviously, the weather could play into that, but I'm excited for what Jameis Winston can do. Obviously, this is not the Jameis Winston of Tampa Bay. I don't know how many times I've had to say that through the first now 7 weeks of the season. This isn't the guy that's going to go throw for 4,500 yards, 5,000 yards, and 40 touchdowns. And he even alluded to it in the offseason that he was going to be more of a game manager with some of those shots thrown in. And I think for what we've seen, the sample size that we have seen, and what you said in terms of just not having a full deck of cards, I think he should be a little bit more appreciated than some of the fans and analysts have given him credit for. Well, Bob, as we wrap up this show, I want to do something a little different outside of just predictions for the score. I want not a crazy prediction, not something that's way out there, but if you had to say one player or one thing will happen tonight, what's it going to be?
The Saints are going to have Jameis Winston is going to have over 300 yards tonight. I think he's
on his Saints career.
I think he's physically built to play well in bad weather. He's got big hands. He's got the big arm. And I've been a fan of Jameis Winston all offseason. And I think he's going to have a good game tonight, despite the fact he's going to have be without Thomas or Deontay. I'm back on the Marquez Callaway hype train. Marquez is another guy who's been playing really well the last couple of weeks. Saints are going to have 2 100-yard receivers, and neither one of them are going to be Traquan Smith. They're going to be Marquez Callaway, and and Kenny Stills, I think, is going to come up big. I think he's going to make a couple deep plays. The Seattle defense is going to have their hands full with Kamara underneath. Kamara is going to have well over 100 all-purpose yards, but I don't think, even though I'd like to see him get used more as a receiver, and it looks like on paper that's a good matchup, I think the fact that he is such a good receiver and Seattle knows it, that's what's going to free things up for Callaway and Stills. So that's my bold prediction, is that Callaway, Stills are going to have big receiving nights. Kamara is going to do his damage on the ground, and Jameis is going to have over 300 yards passing.
Well, I'm glad you said Kenny Stills, because I certainly think with the injury to Harris, the retirement of Hogan, I think it really opens up the door for Kenny Stills to step up. And that's one thing that Saints fans were really hoping would happen, that he'd kind of be a hidden piece of this offense per se, not someone who's going to come out and have a ton of yards, a ton of catches, but maybe even like a Robert Meacham towards the end of his Saints career, where he maybe only had 20 catches, but he certainly impacted games single-handedly. My bold prediction tonight, because we talked about Kevin White earlier, I'm going to predict a Kevin White touchdown, because he's a big-bodied guy. You just talked about how Jameis is in terms of just a physical presence, and how you think that with all of his tools and stature that he's going to be able to kind of work his magic through the weather conditions. I think they're going to look towards the end zone to a big body guy. Yeah, they have Juwan Johnson, who has had a great season in the red zone, but why not throw it up to Kevin White, give him some confidence, because he hasn't played in a regular season game in quite a while in his NFL career. So I'm going to say Kevin White with a touchdown. And remember, the Saints, #1 in the league in both offensive red zone efficiency and defensive red zone efficiency. So I'm going to take an interception in the red zone as well. We'll give it to Marshawn Lattimore because I think he's due one. How about that? Well, finally, Bob, let's get some score predictions and let these guys go get something to eat and get ready for game.
Brendan, earlier in the week, I was predicting that the Saints would come out of here with a 34-16, 34-17 victory. I think weather is going to keep the score down just a little bit, but I'm with you. I think the Saints are going to make be extremely disruptive to the Seattle backfield, and I think they're going to come up with a couple turnovers. I think the Seahawks are still going to get beaten handily in this one. I'm going to go with the Saints 27-10.
Ooh, that's pretty close to what I predicted earlier in the week as well. I'm going to take the New Orleans Saints 24-13. I think the weather conditions keep it a little bit closer, at least in terms of the score, than it needs to be, but I think the Saints are dominant start to finish. And I like your bold predictions, Bob. I'd like to see 2 100-yard receivers, especially in rainy Seattle. Bob, before we ask you how to follow you on Twitter, this is just a fun little thing. So it's a Monday night. We're all in a good mood here. Saints fans, I'm sorry if this brings you into a bad mood, but over-under how many times ESPN has to remind us of what happened all the way back in 2010, 2011?
Given the hatred that the national media has for the New Orleans Saints in general, I'm going to say that it's either that we'll see at least 3 highlights of it, and it'll be mentioned no less than 5 times.
Wow, going pretty high, there. I'm going to say it's probably going to come up. They'll show the highlight once. It'll come up in conversation at least 3 times. Fans, but also remember, Drew Brees will be making an appearance on ESPN2 with the Manning broadcast. So if you want to see what Drew's up to and hear his commentary on the team that he was the leader of for 15 years, make sure you head over there on ESPN2. Bob, where can everybody follow you on the World Wide Web?
Well, first of all, everybody, thank you for tuning in with Brendan and I for our pregame show. Make sure you ignore Breeze and the Manning brothers at halftime and come back and join us for our live halftime broadcast. But I can be followed personally on Facebook, Bob Rose, or over on Twitter at BobbyR2613. All of my works and writings I publish on my personal page, but can also be found on the SI.com team channel, Saints News Network, or at Saints News on over on Twitter.
And for myself, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at BT Boylan. Follow all of our work with the Saints News Network. We have John Hendricks reporting live from CenturyLink Field. Make sure to check out him on Twitter. Make sure to follow him throughout the game, and certainly for those game recaps. Make sure you keep it right here and you come back and join us at the half. New Orleans Saints' first Monday night appearance of 2021 there against the Seattle Seahawks. We'll see you back for halftime. Bob, go grab your favorite food of choice because Monday Night Football is the time to go do that. We'll see you soon.